think it was a really good event. It was nice to hear from all the people that were on the panel.
I think the key takeaway from today is that the AI is there and it can be utilised across many parts of hospitality.
And it feels to a certain extent that element of AI and automation, it's a double-edged sword.
Through the Next Wave Hospitality event series, we look at where technology meets human service for transformation that delivers.
We've been on the road with Ryan for quite some months, and all the hoteliers that we spoke to wanted more of these events.
So my key takeaway from today was the importance of bringing people within the hotel industry together to really share their experiences and their challenges.
In a lot of these events, you have people standing up to deliver great speeches, great introductions, but the key to this was actually little mini breakout sessions in the room where you just turned around, spoke to 5 or 6 people around you and actually allowed you to build a few more connections, a few more conversations. And actually that's the magic that I think comes from these events.
I know there was a lot of talk about AI, and some people are kind of sick to death about hearing it, which I totally understand, but it does seem that everybody does have that thirst to know more about what AI can do to help people and what the guest experience is as well.
Yes, you might want to automate, you might want to implement AI to a certain extent, but then that takes away that work, that interaction in certain areas between the teams and your staff with your guests.
We didn't reduce the staff, we used the staff in a different way. So actually it means that we then are able to spend more time calling guests, emailing guests, the proactive side that we didn't have time before.
And that's the stuff that's going to allow true the hospitality part, those precious moments, those connections with the staff be hopefully more frequent.
My key takeaways from today are that the hospitality industry centres on 3 things: people, passion and purpose.
Hello and welcome to a LinkedIn takeover on the Hosper page. I'm here live from the Everyman Theatre at Broadgate with an audience of the Next Wave Hospitality. Let's hear you, everybody. So in this session, sponsored by Focus on Hospitality, AI has dominated our conversations over the last 18 months, and we are going to pick it apart with our panelists. Personalization, automation, smarter operations, predictive insights, chatbots, voice bots, RPA, what is next? Ambitions is exciting, but are we trying to build the deck of the roof terrace before securing our foundations? Well, behind me, I have our panelists. I'm Ryan Haynes, the host of Hoteliers Voice podcast, and Haynes Marcombs, the director. And here I have behind me, Eric Fletcher, Focus Group. Give a little wave. Kevin Edwards, Hospitality Technology Advisory. Gavin Allison from Yotel, and Samuel Ackford from Exclusive Collection. Cutting through the hype. Where are we with AI in our journey? What are the real blockers inside hotels today? What foundations do need to be in place to deliver value? And how do operators make smarter investment decisions? So starting off, Kevin, what's your point of view as to where we are with the adoption of AI at the moment?
Thank you. Slide. There we go. Now we're working. Technology is easy. Yeah, AI, it's a massive subject. And I look at it quite simplistically, and even on a much broader scale, when we consider, I think everyone's view of AI is it really running away with us? Is it now so far ahead? I mean, we've heard about the security risks, and it seems mad that we're going to go through potentially a next huge technology revolution, just like the internet, and not really think about the basics. Nobody's actually stood back and thought, right, okay, what security and safeguards do we actually need to put in place to deploy this technology? And that's on a global scale. So if anybody's interested, there's a great film got released, Chasing Utopia, and it's with Mo Gadwat, the ex-Google X guy. And it's fascinating, in terms of, the actual sort of use cases for AI was predominantly not for the public, and now it's in the public domain and it's scary. So, in humanity, we should be really worried. But actually, the best thing is, from a business point of view, we actually have the opportunity to take control. And for me, just like when I consider the internet, it starts not in IT, not in the CIO's office or in the IT department. It starts with the business, and it starts with policy. What are the policies that actually our employees, our suppliers are actually going to adhere to? And without those guardrails, you've got free reign. Data gets exposed to all sorts of systems. There's no control, there's dilution of brand. Yet there's so many challenges that unless you put those controls and safeguards in place from day one, you're going to end up with absolute Armageddon.
Now, if we come over to Eric, I mean, let's look at some of the ways in which the wider business community has been approaching AI. Is this conundrum beyond hospitality at the moment?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think every sector is going through right now. Hospitality is the one we're talking about today, and one of the newer ones to that field. But I think banking has already been there, healthcare has already been there, the legal sector has already been there. So I think there's lots to be learned by looking out and seeing what the rest of the world is doing. But they're all facing some of the challenges. Then going back to Gavin's point, I think the governance is the absolute key thing. And going back to an earlier conversation, the infrastructure piece is key. You can't avoid the underlying infrastructure. You can roll out AI, you can think it's all great, but if you're working on a single interconnection, you're relying on fault. So you have to build the foundation first. And I think you have to come down to what problem you're trying to solve. Every industry has asked that question. What problem are we trying to solve? AI is just a tool. What problem is it going to solve?
I mean, it's been very interesting recently, particularly around, how hospitality systems can solve this, where it's going to be embedded. But I mean, Sam, more at a strategically leadership level, where are you thinking about this within Exclusive Collection?
Well, it's to Eric's point, really. AI is a great tool, but again, like any tech, any project, what's the objective? So if you're really clear on the objective, it may form part of that, it may not. But until you understand that, know the different touch points along the project of where you're going to measure that success, you're not really going to know whether it is relevant or not, and when the investment is worth going down, because you want to be able to measure what is that return. Has there been a success or a failure of whatever the project is? Because it isn't a strategy in and of itself, AI. So I think it's just really key having those business objectives clear in mind, so then you can see, okay, does AI form part of it? May well do, probably will, but you need to be able to measure it along the way.
And dare I ask, we've had a crazy 6 years though, Sam, isn't it? The hospitality industry has been turned inside out. So how do you determine what those objectives are for a long-term investment?
I mean, for us, it's about flexibility. So we've had kind of before this panel, all the bad news around the industry. Flexibility is key to be able to adapt to those, and AI can form a good part of that. And probably more than ever, that return on investment might stack up more because the flexibility stacks up. But unless one is really clear about what those objectives are, how to measure it, et cetera, you're not really going to know, rather than just putting AI in for the sake of it because of all the hype, etc.
So as VP of Information Technology and Innovation, Gavin, where are you looking at it from a Yotel perspective and technology infrastructure?
We're taking it slow. We're not going to rush into anything. I particularly enjoyed listening to Neil earlier talk about how you involve everybody, both horizontally as well as vertically, in order to understand exactly what those objectives are for the business that need to be solved. Because AI really is just another tech on top of it. However, the design, the architecture underlying, all of that, connecting all of your technology together really is about the most important piece that needs to be answered first before anybody comes and talks about architecture. How do you present data that's actually going to add value and solve those business problems? I think that's the biggest issue that needs solving first before we start talking about AI.
And have you solved it?
No.
I mean, but how are you looking at that? I mean,
think
there's
the
layers
problem
of business applications, isn't there, in the industry?
Yeah, I think, honestly, the issue is everybody is very hyped up about AI at the moment. And all of the vendors and all of the third parties that we're currently dealing with in a hotel environment, we have 20 different applications. And I guarantee you, each one of those vendors is working on some flavor of AI built into their product. And my personal worry is that after about a year or two, we're going to have 20 AI agents running in applications, and we're just going to land up with the same age-old problem of siloed information within our hotels, rather than having a look, stopping at the moment, all of us getting together and architecting it in a way that we actually solve our hospitality data problem that's existed forever and a day.
Now, I mean, going over to Kevin for a second, I just wanted to ask you about how do you push back on vendors and get the reality of the AI?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think there's so much smoke and mirrors, coming from the vendors. They drop AI in there, and it's great as part of an investment deck. But I think the reality is that there's very few that are truly leveraging, what we see as like true classes of AI. I think, for me, it's about retaining control. So, we're working with one organization at the moment where, you establish a real committee, which is, focusing on the things that are important to the business. So, whether that be, guest centricity or whether that be like, almost sort of human, primacy in terms of, the humans making decisions, whatever it may be. I think unless you've got those core principles as an organization that you design, business applications or solutions to, then everything else just goes out the window. You can be led so far down the road by, different vendors because it's just all hype, and they are jumping on the bandwagon. So, but, let's face it, many of the technologies that we see within, the compounds of AI have been around for, decades. There's nothing new in a lot of what we're doing. We talk about, manipulating large, data sets, which was saying big data a few years ago. There's nothing new that what we're dealing with. And I think, to Gavin's point, it's frightening, working across many different organizations, the amount of organizations that don't really have very clear objectives of what their project is to deliver. And more importantly, actually, and this is where I see failings in virtually every organization, is that clear understanding of how you're going to measure that return after it's gone in. Everyone comes up with a great business case of we're going to return £1 million, but it never happens because nobody ever monitors it. That said, you touch into the private equity side and actually they're measuring every single penny. So perhaps maybe rather than really getting overly transfixed on how AI is going to replace every job, we maybe need to transfix on actually how do we truly measure what return technology is actually going to deliver for us.
So same, different name, Eric. Let's look at sort of ROI then, across industry or within hospitality. Where have you seen the best application and success?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in general, it's the small things. I think there's loads of organizations, hospitality, are not looking at deploying agents, looking at agentic logic, trying to get these really, really fancy solutions in place. These really, very complicated things that, again, what problem you're trying to solve? Basic productivity, just save people a few minutes a day, a few hours a week. That's the stuff that has a real return on investment. That's time you can better spend on looking after the guests better. That's time you can spend on research. The time spent you can work on improving, developing yourself. That's the stuff I think that makes a real difference. And that's what I spend a lot of time talking to my customers about, is where are we going to get that basic level stuff in place? Because the big ideas will come later. The big tools will come later, mostly from the vendors. But for you, save a few minutes a day. That's the key ROI for me.
That question came through Slido from Lawrence. I'd like to throw that over as well to Sam there. Where are you seeing current gains for your business with AI?
I mean, it's to Gavin's point really about data. So that was the absolutely age-old negative side around all these different siloed bits of data. But if there can be a more strategic view of it, okay, I can pull that data together, have one central view of the truth, it then is really powerful in looking at past predictions, all that kind of stuff that then can inform business decisions. And so, yes, it's a problem, but AI can be part of the solution if we're not vendor-led, if we're kind of really intentional about, okay, we want to do X, Y, and Z to be able to pull data out to make decisions.
Data, Gavin, it's also a security issue, isn't there? We just heard from Mimecast as well regarding sort of how do you maintain the level of cybersecurity in an ever-increasing world of data and access points. So AI needs to have some sort of ring fence around it. What do you look at when it therefore comes to building that infrastructure for security?
I think, once again, going back to what Neil said, hire a designer. Hire somebody that, IT departments within hotels, within hospitality industries, we just don't have the resource outside of the big three, the Accors and the Marriotts. We don't have the resources in-house to be able to securely deploy all of this technology that's being presented to us. So hire a designer, hire somebody that can come in and, once again, like I said before, architect it in a way that A, meets the business objective, C, is secure, and thirdly, is applicable to all the laws that are coming into play. If you look at the EU AI Act, it's coming in August, I believe this year is the first wave, and then the second wave is coming in 2027 for what they're classifying as high-risk AI deployments. So, there are various different layers of compliance that are needed when thinking about deploying this. But as of August, if you've got a chatbot, if you use Duetto or Ideas to do your pricing, you're going to have to declare that. And there's certain privacy agreements or privacy policies that are going to need to be updated. So it really does affect everybody in the business, from your in-house counsels all the way through down to legal teams, to operations and everything else. However, not to be the damper on the party of AI, it does have the ability to affect positively everyone in the business. So it does, however, need governance around it, strict governance.
And talking to everybody in the business, number of stakeholders, that needs level of engagement as well. Sam, when you're looking at it from exclusive collection, how are you trying to really communicate across your team that greater role of technology and automation?
I mean, it's that balance of what the risk is, and I mean the last presentation covered that quite well, looking at the risks and how do you measure per employee who is presenting more of a risk, but then also recognition that shadow IT is happening. There is going to be risk, and how do you manage that in an acceptable way? Because you don't want to stifle it completely, because you also then stifle creativity. But how do you not expose your business? So it's about that training. Okay, what are the benefits? How do we leverage it? And then again, what are we trying to achieve, so that all the staff are aware of how we're using different tools to achieve the main business objectives.
I mean, Kevin, two reasonably well resourced businesses here, but what about smaller independent businesses or independent businesses that don't have sort of the on-site teams to be able to transition and develop this strategy?
Yeah, and with all due to respect, with as individuals, even the size of your organizations, I think you both recognize that there's a real validity in external guidance. I think we are literally talking about, the top 4 or 5 hotel brands actually have, the necessary investment in sort of IT resources to be able to truly understand and manage risk and design systems with the right intent. And that is primarily why we exist. We are there to assist, whether that be at an executive level, whether that be, at a design and foundational level. I think it's essential, and if you look at, the sort of the wider sector, particularly for hospitality, the sort of emergence and growth of, fractional services, whether that be, technology or whether that be, brand or creative, there's a real need for certain skills. And I think there is now an acceptance, particularly within smaller hospitality organizations, that actually they add a huge amount of value. So I think it's a mindset shift that we've seen. I think traditionally, IT has always been a little bit of a dumping ground and a little bit, expectation of, okay, well, you're just going to know everything. You just, and if you walk out of here and you go out into Broadgate and you look into the banks and, you look at the size and scale of their IT departments, they're dealing with exactly the same challenges and risks. If anything, I would say that we probably have broader risks within hospitality because of that public engagement. So, what's the expectation? And I think now maybe, an executive and even at an ownership level, there's a greater understanding of actually the breadth that IT has to cover.
I mean, yeah, you're looking at innovation here. How do hospitality stand out in the crowded market? How do you make things different for your guests and deliver on their experiences? Now, a question here really around that, about how AI generally is improving for hospitality, rather than just adding tech because we feel the pressure to be innovative. Do you think that's the case from an operator's perspective, or is that something that feels being pushed on you from maybe more the vendor tech side? Gavin, I mean, in your role.
Definitely being pushed on by the vendor side at the moment. But in terms of, personalization at scale, AI has the ability to offer that in speeds that we've never been able to achieve before, in terms of truly understanding from multiple data sources what our guests are doing in our establishments. It took a long time previously to run through reports and compile profiles and so forth. AI's ability to do that today in milliseconds with for a spa team, for an F&B team, or for a front desk is certainly something we've never had the pleasure of living with before. So in terms of innovation, yes, it certainly does offer the ability to personalize guests' stays, experiences extremely quickly, like we've never seen before. However, once again, it's not down to AI built into a spa application. It's not down to AI built into an F&B application. It really is all of those applications talking together in order to provide that service. And I think that's the biggest benefit of AI. But once again, it's not AI, it's the architecture underneath that's going to create that ability for our operational teams.
I mean, I think it's fascinating for what it can enable a business to do, whether it's a humongous enterprise or it's a small startup, a smaller business that has great ambitions, with the opportunity, like we saw from the third world countries, of leapfrogging digital transformation, being able to leave behind some of that technology we've had in the last 20 years and really pick up with this new technology. Eric, that's something that you're sort of seeing as well, with how enterprises are adopting that tech, as well as how agile it's allowing smaller businesses to be.
Completely. And actually, to Gavin's point, I think where we're seeing the most success with AI aren't businesses that are trying to do AI. They're businesses that have always stayed on the cusp of things. They've always kept up to, they don't have this legacy environment they've got to get rid of. I think that's why Africa has been able to make that leap, especially, or most of the third world's been able to make the leap from technology in general, not just AI, but from banking technology, because they didn't have the legacy infrastructure. If you're starting from scratch, you can do a lot right now. If you've kept up to date, you can do a lot right now. AI is not going to work if you've got a monolith system. AI is not going to work if all your files are in a back room somewhere. You have to have kept pace with it or be starting from scratch, essentially.
Investment's a big thing. I mean, we've got to remember there's a financial investment as well as a resource and technological investment here. And I think one of the points you made out, increasing amounts of data, therefore, what does it cost to run these AI applications, these AI platforms? So a question from Kelp, and if I just also subsume that in with a question that I have, what is needed in order to really invest in large AI infrastructure, and what is the potential of increasing cost as a result of diving into AI? And I know that we had this bit of a chat prior, Gavin, on your concerns there.
Yeah, definitely. And once again, it comes down to design. Having somebody that actually understands how AI works and how you can minimize the costs when you are utilizing tokens and so forth against your data sets. It's getting technical now, but the bigger your data get, the more tokens you're going to use. Having somebody that really understands the various different levels of AI needed to achieve a certain task can certainly reduce the costs on a business. And those technical skill sets are something that are new to all of us, including IT. It's not, but I encourage all businesses to really start to understand how those costs can impact any AI deployment, whether it's built into a vendor's application or whether it's an AI strategy that you've put on top of some sort of data within your business. There are so many levels, and they're changing so fast, and the pricing's changing so quickly. It's difficult to keep up with, but having somebody that understands those levels built into what's available to us today will certainly help your business moving forward. And I think the more you deploy AI into your business across various different organizations, having the finance person sitting next to you is really, really beneficial. They are the ones that are going to be able to direct where ROI can be applied to any business strategy or any process or task that you're trying to solve.
So a much closer relationship there between tech and finance. And I guess, as an advisor there, Kevin, one of the things you got to think about is the rising costs of AI tools and how you plan the longer term financial strategy.
Yeah, no, that's it's a subject that comes up frequently. I think, especially where, we get a lot of engagement, particularly from hotel ownership groups, to go in and work with the operators. And now we're seeing this real, huge shift, over the past sort of 15 years, really, moving away from sort of the capital requirement into operating costs, and suddenly now, the sort of the owner's thinking, well, this is quite good. It's off my sheet, but, it's sitting on the P&L, and that's all the time squeezing the operator. And AI is going to be no different, and there's only a finite amount of revenue that you're going to generate back out, and so much efficiency that you can find within the operation. So I think the ROI thing is absolutely key. It really is. Everything comes back down to understanding what the financial impact is of any of these solutions.
That was a question from Dave Bennett from Slido, so keep them coming in, please. Sam, approaching that infrastructure piece there, are you looking a lot more closely about how they're all connected and pinned together across, and how centralized they are or how decentralized they are?
Yes, in a word. I mean, back to Gavin's point, there is the issue of all this kind of fragmented data, and probably in the last few years there has been a shift to that whole kind of best in breed approach, but it does mean you've got these different chunks of data sitting, and so it's how do you link that all together. So for us, it's having that kind of one source of truth, so we're able to pull that data out to enable us to make decisions. And yes, we can link AI into that, but it's about having that true version of the business across all the different areas, so we're not then having, to Gavin's point again, about all these different AIs talking and maybe giving conflicting suggestions. We then have that single piece of data.
Now, we've been talking very much strategic, back office, leadership perspective, but experience is everything in our hospitality, right? What does that guest experience? And this comes again from Slido. How do we bring that feeling through technology and AI deployments? How are you approaching that from a human to AI side? You can start, Sam.
So, absolutely. So I think it's just recognizing that hospitality is fundamentally human. So if you're trying to replace that with AI, I'd suggest that probably isn't a great a great strategy. So it's looking at, okay, well, what can AI do? What's that objective again? Maybe behind the scenes stuff that allows our staff to do what they do well. We've kind of mentioned the smile previously, but kind of delighting our guests, our customers, and AI then in not getting in the way of that is just enhancing that further.
Gavin.
I would say partner very closely with your commercial directors, your digital directors, etc. The guys building the windows to your business in terms of web pages and so forth. It's all interlinked now. Everything, if you can track what guests are doing on a website, and when they, reference that when they walk into your establishments and make use of the interesting things they might have read on your website around activities and so forth. If that can be used when they walk through the doors, it's an incredible experience for anyone. Having all of that linked together and one true guest profile representative of a guest, independent of where they've touched your business and at what touch point, is imperative to providing that incredible experience today. However, once again, to Kev's point, it's not IT. It really is. It involves everybody in the business. And I would partner very closely with all the other disciplines.
Now, I mean, it's not always just the leadership. It can be the owner of a business that has grand ambitions. And sometimes it might necessarily not be the right place to be deploying AI. Eric, any sort of advice you'd give there on helping people push back and really argue a case for this is not the right place for AI?
No, 100%. I think the thing to remember with AI, it's a force amplifier. Bad data, bad systems, bad processes, bad practices, they'll get worse with AI. Good practices, good processes, good systems will get better with AI. It's not going to solve a problem that you couldn't solve as yourself. It just does things faster. So that's the key thing. So again, what problem are you trying to solve? It always comes down to that as a core question.
Now, Kevin, just smaller hotels, where should be their first step when it comes to AI?
Just from what I said right from the start, it comes with policy, understanding it and making real clear demarcation to employees, what they can and can't do, what data can and can't be used within these systems. Even something as basic as that will make a huge difference. And the next part is, the whole data governance thing. I think it's such a big word. And I think that will scare many, many hoteliers and smaller hotel organizations. But even down to the basics of like classifying Word documents and Excel, is it confidential? Is it restricted? So simple. But without that, suddenly, connecting, SharePoint to, Claude or something like that, you're just opening up a can of worms. I actually, within our organization, we've done some experimentation of actually what could we find? It was quite frightening, once we, unless you've got that classification of documents. And again, is it an IT thing? No, you know what? It's a human responsibility in terms of it's your data. You should be taking ownership of actually, this is confidential. And quite often when, you get these breaches, the first place you go is the IT department, but actually it normally sits at the heart of somebody who's just not classified a document.
Another question that was from Carl Weirden at on the Slido there, and follow up on that. Again, this also ties into what you just said, Kevin, but over to Gavin. How do you balance the hyper personalization with guest privacy, especially as travelers become more aware and cautious about how their data is being used?
A very good friendship with your in-house counsel. So
if you've got one, right?
If you've got one. A previous project I did in another lifetime, we went about integrating 3 different revenue verticals into one and presenting out a guest profile. And about 6 months of design work went into sitting with lawyers. Honestly, it was all the data privacy agreements and so forth. The laws are quite straightforward. Ensuring that you have all of those contracts in place, ensuring that you have all of the ability around that data from the onset in order to comply with all of the regulation around what guest data you hold and what your responsibilities are around that data is imperative. And it's only going to be amplified once the AI Act comes into place as well. So honestly, a lot of time, do your due diligence in terms of governance before deploying anything.
I mean, it's been really interesting what you've had to say today around compliance and regulation that's coming up, and something for us all to be aware of and perhaps have more educational sessions on, because we really need to get on top of that, because obviously the risk in hospitality is humongous. And what I think is fascinating is I sit here having this conversation with you, having done a session at the Independent Hotel Show 3 years ago around AI, and I decided to go, right, what is the practical deployment of AI? And we talked a lot about chatbots, voice bots, and they're everywhere now in any business. So we're seeing a lot of guest-facing AI. And thanks to everybody who's just anonymous on the Slido, by the way, because this is yet another question here. We've had a lot of that guest-facing, perhaps while underestimating the benefits from an operational perspective. Or is that much more difficult to harness? Or to realize? Where are you particularly in really thinking about the operational side of it? If I come to Kevin first.
Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, when you get into the operation, it's quite interesting because you sort of speak to people on the floor, and there's a real concern, isn't there? It's like AI is going to take our jobs. And now what we're saying is, can you tell us how they're going to take your jobs? It is a thing. What's interesting, I recently ran a workshop with a client whereby we actually engaged in the Young Leaders Program. So you're talking people sort of 25 and under, and actually went to them and set them tasks to come up with ways in which they could see AI being deployed within the operation. And compared to ops managers, hotel managers that sit within the AI committee, what you get is a completely different parallel universe. You get this so much imagination. And you sort of think, well, what's holding us back? And actually it's us in some degree. It's sort of, it's the management, it's the ownership. Some of these ideas coming out about how it can be used. And so I think that, that there just needs to be an openness. And most of this comes down to good communication, good dialogue. in terms of them understanding how it can actually enhance them. And I think to one of the earlier points, we talk about reducing time as almost this way of return on investment mechanism. And it's great that we say, oh yeah, it's going to free up an hour a day. But what that is that hour actually going to be used for, and who's actually going to measure if that is done? Because I don't think anybody is. But that is something which, if you focus on that, then actually the benefit of bringing AI more into your operations is huge.
I mean, I think if we could all go back and have conversations with our 20-year-old selves and the frustrations that we had, and we worked for a company and all those processes and procedures that we had to follow, and we didn't make any sense, did it? And we thought, well, why didn't you do it that way? And he said, well, no. And even now, we're here 20 years later, and we're still saying no. And it's interesting, when I had a conversation, I had a call a couple of weeks ago from a young lad. He was 20. And he set up his own business offering chatbots to hotels, and he'd already had 10 customers, and he just built all this himself using AI. And that's how quickly and how fast it can move. But Arik, you've seen ways in which even complex sectors like finance and health are really utilizing that technology and AI to advance and move forward.
Yeah, I think it's key. I mean, obviously the security piece is key, because it's great to innovate, I think, and there's lots of innovation happening right now in the space, and that's fantastic. But I think we are running at breakneck speed in some respect. It's innovation, sometimes for the sake of innovation. So it's cautious. It needs to be a bit more cautiously done, I think, in some respects. But yeah, there's so much stuff around guest service, there's so much stuff around data where you've got the integration. I think what I'm seeing, even within Focus, what we're seeing is the way you can weave data together now, and the reports you can generate, the results you can get are something we couldn't have even dreamt of 3-4 years ago. So it's amazing what you're able to do with it. But I think a bit of caution is also necessary along the way, because what are you doing with that data? Just because you can use it doesn't mean you should, really.
AI, I mean, we've talked about AI and communications, and as I come to perhaps within the screen here, as we come to close, I mean, any areas, Sam, that you've seen the misuse of AI across all your experiences, personally or professionally, or could be rethought?
So I'll preface it with not in my organization, but I mean, it's to the point about the whole purview of data. It is really easy to just scrape what could be sensitive data. And so, I mean, the example, if it exists somewhere and it's not correctly classified, you can pull the salaries of, the board, the C-suite quite easily, or whatever data is trying to be looked at. So unless, as a business, we're really on it with that security, that classification of documents, our employees are often a bit ahead of the curve in just using that. They're using it day to day for their personal life anyway. So that is one area, I think, where it can be quite easily misused.
3 other peers alongside you, Gavin. Is there one thing that you're particularly taking from the conversation today?
I would say every single one of your employees is using AI at the moment in your business. I guarantee you, because it's making their lives easier. And as Kevin said, having that open dialogue with them from the onset now about the use of AI, the risks of AI, and ensuring that they're all trained on it would be step number 1.
And Kevin, I mean, what is one thing that you would strongly advise our audience?
Yeah, I think for me, there's one statement which I'd always keep in your mind, which is, think about that governance. And, we have the ability to govern how AI is used within our organizations. Don't mess it up. I could have been stronger worded with that, but don't mess it up, because we're in control.
Thank you very much indeed. And certainly from having heard the conversation over the last 30, 40 minutes, I think one thing is a heed of warning: take a step back, pause and think about whether it's right for your organization, for your brand, and clearly that you've got all the systems and tech stack in place, and you're seeking counsel from those people who've got that level of experience. Certainly, I think we're all feeling the effects of it, and there is naturally a worry, and perhaps again having that conversation with our younger selves. And they exist, they're in your organization. So get them together as a focus group and find out what they really think is going to be their future, because I think we all realize that our futures haven't necessarily realized in the same way that we did do 20 years ago. But here we are. I'd like to sign out from the New Wave Hospitality on Hosper, discussing AI alone won't fix it, with my panelists, Eric, Gavin, Sam, and Kevin. I've been Ryan Haynes. Thank you very much. And for our audience,
and that's very important, isn't it? The guest experience now, as somebody mentioned earlier, it's almost seen as a utility, isn't it? It's, if you don't have your Wi-Fi connection, it's as bad as not having hot water. It's that critical now to the guest experience.
There is no replica for a good human service.
We are in Edinburgh today with HOSPA for another regional event sponsored by Focus on Hospitality. Today's series of Next Wave Hospitality is about tech transformation that delivers. We are exploring the impact of technology, data and AI for flexing resources and supporting teams for human-delivered guest experiences.
So guests want more connection, they want more memorable stays. They're happy to pay as long as the experience lives up to their perceived value. 76% of travellers want more technology, but only when it reduces friction.
Hands up anyone in the room who reads reviews before they book a hotel. Hands up if you don't read the review. Do you need help? Do we need to phone somebody?
We talk about AI a lot, and AI is and automation is very, very reliant upon data, but it's very reliant upon good data. If the data that's collected is not very good, then the AI outcome is not going to be necessarily a positive one.
When we talk about guest experience and guest expectations, that's immediately a friction. So for years, as hoteliers, we try to make it so seamless, but the system does not support the journey that we want delivered.
We're never about replacing the people, we're about improving the service and improving people. Or whenever I'm going to deploy an AI solution, it's going to be customer facing, it's going to take bookings, it's going to do everything, it's going to delete the need for human beings. If we can get out of that idea and start thinking, well, let's use it for what it's really, really good at, comparing data sets, then actually we are going to provide a better customer service.
Like, great hospitality is welcoming somebody into your own home, and the fundamental of a boutique hotel over a chain hotel is your ability to see the customer. And we live in a world where technology is making things so seamless that you actually don't need to speak to humans anymore in so many parts of your life.
We are in Manchester today. We're Focus on Hospitality in partnership with HOSPA.
and we're going to be having conversations looking at new wave hospitality, transforming communication, data and performance, and how hoteliers are grappling with compliance and regulation.
Especially thank you for making the journey. I know a lot of you are local, which is brilliant, and that's what we were hoping to achieve. 6 hospitality venues a day will close down in 2026 unless things change. At HOSPA, we love partnering with people who are really offering proper solutions to hoteliers, and today the event here in Manchester has really proved the value of what integrators can do, what suppliers can do, and how they can enhance the life of the average hotelier.
In terms of pace and volume, number of transactions, deals done, you're outpacing last year, which is really, really encouraging.
I didn't know what I was going to expect from the panel because a lot of it was about compliance and performance and data. But actually, the panelists brought that data alive, and I learned a lot of information.
All of that copper infrastructure around the UK is going fully hosted. Get all of that infrastructure out of your server rooms that you've got down, probably in basements of hotels and whatnot, on your big server racks. Strip all that down.
So my biggest takeaway from today really is how the hospitality industry as a whole is engaged in wanting to learn and see what the tech adventure is going forward. Everybody can learn from each other and take things away.
It's about giving them the tools to be able to operate and work smarter.
One of the biggest challenges has been the anonymisation of data. So, if you look at, you'll all be the same in the room, 50% of your reservations that are coming in, you don't know who they are, you know their name.
We've got to be doing more from a government perspective. They've got to be doing more to protect us and to help drive people into our industry, and just putting their hand in our pockets for bigger business rates and stuff like that is not the way to do that. If anything, it's going to be counterintuitive.
What I really want is to be told, go straight to your room. When you're ready, come down, and we'll serve you a nice glass of champagne when you're ready for it. Thank you very much. That's understanding customer.
And if you can't drawing in meaningful conclusions that drive action and improvement, then you have to ask yourself the question of why you're doing it in the first place.
So I'm going to counter that, because I think that you're burying your head in the sand if you don't think AI is taking jobs away from people in this space.
Some of our properties' rateable value has gone up 180%, and our business rates next year will be up 40-45%.
Companies like Hosper and Focus On come together to host these events in the industry, where hoteliers and tech vendors can meet in a relaxed environment to have those brutally honest discussions that don't get talked about on a regular basis but need to happen for the benefit of the industry.
To have a chance to see so many hospitality people in the north of England for a change, and a chance to talk about everything current, and especially linking tech and revenue. So great day.
Looking forward to next one in Edinburgh on March 17. So look out for the invites. They'll be going out soon, and hopefully you can join the next conversation. We are in Manchester today